Welcome to Mastering CS Candid Leader Insights, the podcast where we dive into the world of customer success with industry leaders. I'm your host, Irina Cismas, and today I'm joined by Juliette Marland, Senior Customer Success Manager EMEA at Redis, a real-time data platform powering AI apps and agents. Juliette, I'm really happy to have you here. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Really happy to be on the podcast.
Before we dive in, you came into Redis as a founding member of the CS team, and you are now running EMEA's largest enterprise accounts. Paint us a picture of your day-to-day there. Who are your customers, and what does the work actually look like?
Yeah, of course. So my customers are some of the largest enterprise accounts that we have here in EMEA. It goes across a lot of different types of industry. We have financial services, telecoms, the public sector, gaming, consumer apps. It's really companies that are running Redis at a serious scale where the database is generally a critical path of something that matters to the business. Just to give you examples, it can be about processing millions of benefit payments reliably. It could be about keeping a streaming platform going during big events like the biggest football match of the year. Or it could be just powering real-time matchmaking behind the social app for teenagers that they use every day, millions of them. And that also means that when Redis has a problem, the business has a problem, right? So the day-to-day work coming from that is actually quite varied. A lot of it is strategic. We're thinking about where the customer is headed in the next 12 to 18 months. I think that's pretty general as the work of a customer success, but looking at what the roadmap looks like, where Redis fits into the roadmap. But for Redis specifically, because it's a technical product, there's a lot of technical depth required. I'm not saying that I'm writing code here, but I need to understand what's really happening on the platform, what's happening on the architecture, just to be able to ask the right question and bring the right people at the right time. I feel like there is a lot of relationship player for the customer success. It's a lot about building trust with your economic buyer, building trust with the champions, the different engineers, even the devs sometimes that work on the application every day. So the role is really about, I would say, a real connective tissue between the customer and Redis and just coordinating with the customer, but also internally, like bringing the right person at the right time. It could be on our side, we have more technical people like solution architects, technical account manager. It could even be discussing with the product, have a more in-depth conversation with professional services where you want them to come in and really work with you on the code. We're just, as a customer success, trying to show up at the right time for the customer and at the right moment. Yeah.
What does good onboarding look like at Redis? What are you aiming for in the first few months? And how do you know when you've got there? Because I think based on what you just described, there are a lot of moving pieces. And onboarding seems, based on your description, one of the critical milestones in the user journey, in the client journey with you guys.
It is. You need to really set them up for success. So I would say that three things are critical here. The first one will always be alignment, like making sure that we understand the customer's real priorities. It can sound basic, but it is literally the founding stone of everything that you're going to do with the customer. Understanding their business drivers, maybe the internal politics that they have, because it has an impact on the timeline pressure. And that's why it's important to do, and you can call it a success plan, you can call it a roadmap plan, whatever you call it, you just need to have an ongoing conversation on what good looks like down the line. The second, once you know what are your business outcomes, is the orchestration. So in enterprise accounts at this scale, it's really, as I said before, a team sport. It's not only the customer success manager, it's also the rest of the team, the account manager, the technical account manager, the solution architects. Everyone plays a different role. And I think a big part of my job is that everyone feels like a coherent team. Everyone has a part to play in here, rather than having separate sets of people in the team doing different things and navigating themselves. You need to have a front line of, hey, here's your Redis team, and we're just going to help you achieve your full onboarding. And then the last thing for me would be the value capture. It stems from the first point that I gave. You need to scale the usage, making sure that you're removing all the blockers, surfacing the outcomes, and really measuring what is the value that they're getting for their business at the end of the day. And it's not about technical elements that you're going to give to the customer. It's about, at the end of the day, is it more productivity for the teams? Is it more profitability for the company? It's often in one of those buckets.
I want to ask you, the value realization is something that most CS teams are hard to articulate. How do you take it out from the customer? How do you make him articulate what's the value and where does he see the impact?
I
And in
think
what moment?
Yeah, I think it's straight from the beginning. This is something that you need to plan at the onboarding stage. And you're right. Often we cannot get the business value immediately. And I think that's because we're not talking to the right person. I think you need to up a level a little bit and maybe go higher in the org chart and really understand what are the business objectives of someone that would be higher in the org chart. It could be like a mid-level director, or it could be up to the CTO in the case of Redis. And often the CTO has priorities that have to be with the profitability of the company, or which also goes into the profitability of the company. It would also be productivity of the employees.
And how do you navigate this stakeholder network? How do you, because on a day-to-day, on a day-to-day business, you are talking with your internal champion. But as you mentioned earlier, in order to find out the value, and the business impact, and to understand that, you need to go higher up. How do you do this part without the champion feeling that he was escalated or skipped? I think that's an art to navigate the stakeholder mapping part, and I'm curious how you do it. How do you manage to talk to the right person?
Still going back to your first question on onboarding, I think during the onboarding, you need to really set up the clear expectations, having a clear economic buyer. Like, you need to always have the economic buyer in the loop. Ultimately, the economic buyer is going to weigh in what your product is bringing on the table and the price of your product versus what your product is bringing to their company. And thanks to this, you're really going to be able to balance and measure the value that you're bringing to the business. And so this economic buyer, you want to see him, let's say, maybe it depends on the size of the company, because some of them, when I had my onboarding, I'm thinking of a customer where I met with the economic buyer, which was the CTO, every 2 weeks for the first 6 months. It was just a 15 minutes meeting, but it's thanks to this, you can, as I said, unlock any situation, escalate from the roadmap that you had planned, anything that's going wrong, ask for more resources if you feel like some things are trading back, because it's not in their, you don't want them to be slowed down from the results they're expecting.
So basically, you are nurturing two type of relationships. One is with your internal champion, and the other one is with the economic buyer. And you are always keeping the economic buyer in back on your mind. Whenever you are communicating, you make sure that the right things are reaching him or her as well, right?
Exactly. In the case of Redis, it's a very specific product compared to other companies that I worked on. The situation with Redis is really, you could take it top down or bottom up. You need to do both at the same time. So you would need to speak to your economic buyer, you would need to speak to your champion, but you also need to validate and orchestrate the implementation of Redis in the platform layer. So you need to speak with the platform people and also the end users, ultimately, because they're building the applications on top of Redis. So you need to also speak with the developers, which is more an at-scale thing about them adapting on the product, really understanding the product and the different product features that we have. But I would say there's really 4 layers of it: your economic buyer, the champions, the platform, meaning the ops people operating your product, and then on the last layer, the developers that are building on Redis.
I'm curious, how do you manage to gain the internal alignment? Because you mentioned that it's a team sport. It's not a one-man show thing. In case of your product, how do you make sure you are internally aligned? Because this is something that I see it as a hard thing. We do say that we are aligned, but in reality, this happens less often than we would want to?
So do you mean internally or externally?
Internally, yes. How do you manage to reach an internal alignment with your sales team, with your support, with the product team, with the technical account managers? Because you mentioned that you have access to a lot of resources from the team in order to make your clients successful. So you bring on board multiple people, multiple resources from your side as well. How do you manage to reach an alignment and to make the other teams work for the customer that you are serving?
I feel like it's just working with your colleagues at this point. It's just making sure that you have the right touch points with your colleagues as well, making sure that you have the right strategy in place. If I want to be more operational in my answer, I would say very operationally, having a touch point with the account team weekly and having a strategic call every 3 months on, hey, like what would be brainstorming all together in a room, what would be our roadmap for the next 3 months with this customer, and reviewing everything that the customer launched or is doing, or more information on the roadmap. So I would say this, but the tooling is also a very important part, like linking AI into your tooling as well, having more information. We're leveraging a lot of AI internally at Redis right now. So I would say like making sure that your CRM is up to date, that you have the right health signals, that you have the right support systems in place to see if anything is coming up red on your dashboard. And I think CS Ops takes a huge part into making that possible for us. So I would say it's people thing, just aligning with your people internally, but also tooling and implementing AI into all of this to make sure that you're very successful with the customer and you have the right signals.
Speaking of this, what's the operational infrastructure behind all of this, behind the CS team? What platforms and tools are central to how CS actually runs day to day at Redis? And then we expand also on the AI use cases, because I'm curious, how do you leverage it? But first, what are critical? What are the critical systems that you guys need in order to be operational?
Yeah, I think it's pretty basic, right? We have a CRM, we have our ticketing system, we have and that our internal communication platforms like Slack and Zoom. I think it's pretty general in here, but the most important is how AI is coming on all of it and connecting everything together. I think it's really important that we get a lot of content from the customer and a lot of content online from news about the customer. And AI has really completely changed the way that we operate. We can automate a lot of the workflows now that pulls from a lot of those data sources that I just mentioned. So like CRMs, we have our own system for customer health, and it can really help you produce, for example, structuring briefings to prep for a meeting. It can help you record a conversation and help you create those after the call, the discussions that you can have with the customer. And you can leverage AI as well. We're leveraging it in our Slack channels to tell us health signals about the customers, about our changes, about news that are happening in the newsroom, and really leveraging all of this to link it to what business value Redis could bring for this specific piece of news on their business.
So basically, in this moment, AI is the glue that connects the different systems where customer data might sit, and it connects, it extracts the information, and basically it sends you on the channels that you guys are frequently on, Slack, on email, basically the summary. That would be in a nutshell, right? The way you are functioning as a team.
And you can build your own agent to automate some of the tasks that you're doing regularly as well. If you're working on Excel or doing some type of work on the consumption tracking, then you can leverage some of the agents to help you build a narrative, help you build the slides. If you have a specific conversation with a customer and you have your AI transcript, you can automatically, as I said, create notes, action items, but also link some of the pieces that were mentioned to what your product is doing. So we're linking our latest product releases to what we heard from the customer. And before we used to do this manually, and now it's fully automated into our processes.
And you mentioned the health signals. I'm curious, what are those signals? What are you monitoring in order to make sure that a customer is healthy and is not at risk?
I think monitoring the health signals, it can be anything. It's very multi-factors into it. It could be an org change. It could be a risk signal, having less usage into the product. For Redis specifically, we have a very special way of consuming. We have a consumption that's cloud-based as well as a consumption on software. And this consumption of software, it forces you to think about it differently, I would say, because in a traditional license model, you can easily see, oh, hey, I see the growth, I see that the growth is slowing down. But for the software, for example, you could pretty much not see that you have risk on adoption issues. So healthy for us, it's not only about what the customer is spending, it's a lot of different factors.
I want to take you back for a second. You were a founding member of the CS team. You watched the team scale from EMEA out to APAC and the Americas. When you are building CS from scratch, as you did, where do you actually start from? What was the first thing that you did and you built?
What was the first thing that I built?
Yes, how did you build the team in order to basically support it? Where the foundation? What did you do? Because you were being a founding team, basically, you were one of the persons who put the foundation and you created a strong foundation, taking into account that the team scaled. What did you do? How did you start?
So as the first customer success, I feel like before building dashboards, before building the playbooks, you just need an understanding of what a customer success is actually responsible for, because we had a lot of other roles within Redis in the early days. So the first thing was really defining the role. And as I said, we have a lot of actors here. So what the customer success owns versus the technical manager, that was the first step that we had. And how do you differentiate this for the customer as well, for their understanding, from what support does, what professional services does, and how do we all show up with the customer for a coherent experience? A lot of the kind of early stage building was really and process matters, right? But we also need to understand what success looks like for each customers when we started. And when you start and there's nothing, process doesn't really help much at that stage. So I spent a lot of time with the team back then on the fundamentals. So why the customer bought, what does success look like? How can we measure business value? What type of adoption signals that we were talking about earlier matter? What do customer get stuck in that is preventing from their adoption? And once you understand that, over time, patterns, and thanks to those patterns, playbooks become much more easier to build, and they become much more easier to get used as well by the rest of the team, because they do make sense. And I would say another thing would be also feedback loops. So I feel like a great customer success organization, it just also becomes naturally a source of customer intelligence for the rest of the organization. I feel like the faster you can get insights back to the product team, the engineering team, your leadership, and the faster the company improves, the happier your customers are, basically. So I feel like getting this channel established is one of the key point of success for customer success organizations.
And the last question, is there a habit, a way of thinking, or something you learned the hard way early on that still shows up in how you run accounts today?
Yeah, I think one important lesson that we could mention here is to never confuse activity for value. I feel like in a lot of customer-facing roles, it's easy to think that being the most responsive, running all the meetings, and solving the problem that's right in front of you at the time when there's a fire burning, it's enough and you're doing most. But I feel like it's not sufficient. What I learned is that you need to explicitly really understand the customer strategy, risk, internal success criteria, and make sure that everything feeds into why the economic buyer bought Redis at the end of the day, and focus on things that would bring most to the customer, because sometimes we just get too much into the nitty-gritty details of the day-to-day activity of the customer success.
Juliette, this was a really interesting conversation. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
And to everyone listening, thanks for tuning in. Until next time, stay curious, keep learning, and mastering customer success.